Mayor Glen Robertson in studio with me. That's what happens when you talk politics all the time. You get choked up every now and then.
Well, we're talking about it so much now, I think everybody's choking
Yeah,
up. Yes,
exactly. Mayor Glen Robertson in studio, candidate for Texas 19 congressional seat. Mayor, welcome back. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. You, all of you have been really busy.
Yes, sir.
It seems like there's a new forum every single day across the district. How are those going?
They're going well. I don't know that we're getting a lot of good information out because there's 9 of us, and so you have a limited time. They typically ask between 5 and 6 very complex questions, and you've got a minute to answer. So it forces candidates to have pre-planned, canned responses, and we're not getting a lot of substance out there right now.
Right. How do you, in those forums, what do you try to do as a candidate to maybe change up that message or get a point across that maybe you haven't been able to in other forums, or is it even possible?
Well, I don't go in with pre-planned answers. I just sit there, I listen to the questions, I listen to other candidates' answers, and I just respond. It's not as slick. It doesn't look as professional sometimes because I'm not sitting there pounding the dice. But I think people would rather just hear the facts. How do you really feel about this? And quit coming up with these, like I say, pre-planned, canned responses.
You were in a forum last night down in Abilene.
Right.
One of the questions that popped up, and I've been asked this by other people, was the Abilene versus Lubbock question.
Right.
And I haven't, just from where I'm sitting talking on the show, I haven't seen that really spring up in this election. Have you?
Well, it's been discussed twice in the Abilene market, and I think that's because in 2004, when the Texas 11 manipulated the redrawing of the district lines, it pitted Charlie Stenholm against Randy Nagelbauer. There's still some hard feelings. Abilene felt like, and still feels like, in some instances, they lost their representation. My answer to that question was last night is we've got to move past that. This is 29 counties. We've got more in common than we do in difference, and we got to start talking about the common issues and try to pull this district back together.
Yeah, I don't see much of it up here, of that. It has to be Lubbock versus
Right.
Abilene. But, how much do you hear it from, I guess, regular instead of the moderators of these forums? Do you hear that from regular folks who are out in the Abilene and surrounding communities? You
don't. I haven't heard it anywhere. Like I say, in 2 forums it's been brought up, both of those in the Abilene market. And so I'm very well aware that since they've asked that question repeatedly, there's people that still have that concern that this district is split. Now you got to remember in 2003, it was kind of Lubbock versus Middle and Odessa before we redistricted. So I think that's kind of natural.
Visiting with Glen Robertson, candidate for Texas 19. Also in that forum, and I'm reading for from the Abilene Reporter News, you said that, quote, you can't go wrong in this election when looking at the candidates.
You can. I will tell you, if you look at the candidates on the stage, and I don't want to say the top tier candidates because that upsets some of the people, but if you look at the top 3 or 4 that are ahead in all the polling, if you look at us 4, I think we're going to be ensured that we get good representation. Now, I happen to believe that I'd be the best choice of those 4, but I will tell you those other 3 feel the same way about themselves.
Sure. So how do you separate yourself from those other 2 or 3 people?
I'm the only one in the race that's got 38 years of small business ownership. Also the only one that's got 25 years of public service, serving on 2 school boards, 2 council, and serving as the mayor of Lubbock. The other thing is follow the money. And in anything you're examining, you have to follow the money. I'm the only candidate that hadn't sold out in this election.
What does that mean?
Well, I mean I'm not taking special interest money. I don't have a super PAC backing me. I'm self-financing over 85% of my campaign. And I'm doing it because if I'm elected, I want to go to D.C. and not owe anybody. I don't want to owe anybody but the residents of District 19.
One of your opponents, Colonel Starr, has a PAC
Yes.
that's supporting him, and this has been an issue fairly recently that has been brought up by numerous candidates out there who are taking shots at him having a PAC. Should voters out there be concerned that there is this PAC that no one really knows all the details of, except that it appears as though a lot of former Neugebauer staffers are supporting this PAC and actively involved in this PAC. Should that concern people?
Well, I don't know. I think that's an individual decision. We don't have a lot of facts about that PAC. I'll tell you this, everything they're doing is legal. I won't say it's right, because I don't like dark money in campaigns. I think the question that the voters need to ask, and it's not just to Colonel Starr, but it's of every candidate, they need to look at our finance filings at fec.gov and figure out, because you have to understand, if people are writing big checks, if you've got somebody bundling money, they expect a return on investment, and that return is going to be in for favors, votes. I don't want that kind of representative. I want somebody that's going to go up there. He hadn't sold out, because if you sell out during a campaign, I guarantee you'll sell out once you get to D.C.
You have self-funded, I think, the vast majority of this campaign.
About 85%.
Yeah, you've received campaign contributions.
Yes,
You've
sir.
matched those dollar for dollar, and just like you said you would.
Yes, sir.
Other candidates will say, yeah, but we have the most donations. We've raised the most money. Was this a plan by you, I guess, of saying, okay, we're going to spend less time fundraising and more time talking to people? Is it just a different tactic than other campaigns?
Well, it's really not a tactic. It's just who I am. I'm terrible at fundraising. I was raised, you don't go ask people for money. You don't ask people for help. You get up and you make your own way in this life. So my biggest failing as a quote-unquote politician, and understand every one of us, the minute we signed up to run for Congress, we're now politicians. My biggest failing is asking other people to finance my campaign. So it's double-edged. Number one, I'm not good at it. But number two, I strongly believe that you're going to owe people when you start going after this big money. And I don't want to owe anybody when I get to D.C. except the people that elected me.
Visiting with Mayor Glen Robertson in studio. Before we get to the break, one more thing I want to get to from last night's forum. There was a moment that, and we'll get to another deal with last night's forum too, where I think you came off extremely well in that forum. There was a moment where a question was asked. There's a division among Republicans, the Tea Party versus establishment versus the Donald Trump supporters, and would you go and vote for Speaker Ryan? In your answer, you said that, hey, we do need to get along, and one of the keys to leadership is not forcing our opinion down other people's throats.
Right.
There was another candidate on stage who said, well, I don't want to be put into a box, basically. Sometimes I'd go with the activists, sometimes I'd go with the establishment. Tell us a little bit about your answer, and then also, does that answer from one of the other candidates, should that have people a little cautious?
Well, my answer was simple. Number one, it's premature to make a decision on Paul Ryan. Mm-hmm. We don't know. I don't like the way he handled the omnibus bill. I do know he inherited that from Boehner. I really don't like the way that he handled the Trans-Pacific Partnership. That was completely mishandled. But he has not been given an opportunity to prove himself. And we don't know a year from now who's going to be vying for that spot against him. So I think it's premature to make a decision. You've got to sit back and watch and pay attention. I think to pledge allegiance to either side of the party at this point, or to say that I'm going to go back and forth, that concerns me. The job is not to go up there and form allegiances with one side or the other. The job is to go up there and be fiercely independent. Now, you've got to build coalitions and you've got to build relationships. But if you go up there with the idea that I'm going to play this side one day, I'm going to play the other side the next day, you're going to be rendered completely useless and ineffective.
Visiting with Glen Robertson, candidate for Congress in Texas 19. We'll take the break. When we come back, much more to get into, including the latest budget and conservative demands that are out there. We'll get into that. And your phone calls as well. If you have a question for Glen Robertson, candidate for Congress, give us a call, 770-5790, toll free, 1-800-687-0790. Back on the Chad Hasty Show, News Talk 790 KFYO. Lubbock Mayor Glen Robertson in studio. He's a candidate for Congress, Texas in 19, seeking to replace Congressman Randy Neugebauer. If you have a question, we'll get to the phones here in just a second. Phone lines are open, 770-5790, toll free, 1-800-687-0790. Going back to the forum last night, and you have mentioned this a couple of times in the different forums that I've seen, which was trade and fair trade.
Yes.
Talk to us, our audience, a little bit about that, because I think you go into a little more detail on that issue than some of the other candidates who are in this race.
Well, the reason I go into more detail is I've got 38 years experience battling bad trade policies in my businesses. When we talk about trade policies, we think it only affects our ag producers and our oil producers. It's affecting every small business. I mean, we've got three core issues that are killing West Texas. It's bad trade policies, bad tax policies, and overreaching regulations. When you come to trade policies, we're entering into bad trade agreements to begin with the World Trade Organization. These are giving what they call emerging countries an advantage over us. Not only that, we're not addressing the currency manipulation that's going on after these agreements are signed. And we're the only country involved that's actually living up to our end of the bargain. We've got China, Brazil, and India that are treated as emerging countries, so they get favorable trade status. And then they abuse that favorable trade status, here again, by manipulating their currency rates, which tilts the bar even more in their favor. So we've got to get back to putting our producers first. And I don't care if it's an ag producer, I don't care if it's an oil producer, if it's small manufacturing. Our trade policies are putting our producers at a disadvantage, and we're forcing them to either outsource jobs overseas or to actually move their manufacturing offshore.
So if elected and you get to Washington, D.C., how do you start to change that? Because I think even most people would agree that trade agreements, those aren't the sexy topics that we hear about every single day in the media.
Well, they're not, but it's one of the most important topics.
Right.
And I'd rank the top three is when it comes to our economy and growing jobs in West Texas. Nobody's talking about the economy. Nobody is talking about the fact that we've got ag and oil in the tank and that we could see an extended period of downturn in District 19. We've got to talk about the economy and we've got to talk about jobs. And if you talk about those, you have to drill down deep in the trade policies, down deep into tax policies, and down deep into regulation. It's going to take getting to D.C. and continuing the talk. Trying to get yourself on a path to make sure you're on the right committees, building coalitions, earning the respect of your fellow legislators, and continually harping on these three issues.
Let's go to the phones. If you have a question for Mayor Glen Robertson, candidate for Congress, be sure to give us a call. Let's head out and visit with Otis. Otis, you're on with Mayor Glen Robertson. Good morning.
Good morning. Hi. So my question is in regards to the national debt. We're reaching $19 trillion, and it's something, it seems like, that only appears or becomes a hot issue whenever we reach the debt ceiling. That's the only time it really gets talked about in the media. But it's a complex issue. It requires a lot of cooperation across the board. If you get elected to Congress, how do you plan on finding ways to lower the deficit, much like you did here in Lubbock?
Thank you, Otis.
Thanks, Otis. I
appreciate the call, and I appreciate you pointing out the fact that we have lowered debt in the city of Lubbock. I'm very proud of that. The first thing you've got to start is you've got to start reducing the size and the scope of all the administrative agencies, EPA, OSHA, Department of Education, and I can go on and on with the alphabet soup. The second thing we've got to do is we've got to address this entitlement society we've created. We spend so much of our money incentivizing people to not work. We've got to change those policies. We've got to start creating incentives for people to start growing jobs again. We've got 19, and we've already just rolled over $19 trillion in debt last week. We don't talk about the $100 trillion in unfunded liability this country has. We've got to start living within our means. We need to go back to zero-based budgeting. We need to never have another omnibus bill that combines 12 appropriation bills into one, adds $1.1 trillion in spending. We've got to go back to running this country like a business. And we've got to start electing people that have been in business, that have made payrolls, that have put their name on the bottom line, people that have got experience spending other people's money, that understand that one of your biggest responsibilities as an elected official is a fiduciary responsibility to the people that elected you. We've just got to change those attitudes. We've got to get the career politicians out of D.C. We've got to get the big money. We got to get the special interest groups. This giant money that's being thrown not only at candidates, but it's being thrown at people once they're elected and buying votes. We've got to address those issues.
Visiting with Mayor Glen Robertson, candidate for Congress, you brought up career politicians. One of your opponents says he's not in favor of term limits. You have, I think, some other of your opponents out there who are saying that, accusing just about everyone of wanting to be a career politician.
Right.
Are you for term limits, and how long, if elected, would you like to serve?
I'm definitely for term limits. Now, the problem is Article 5 of the Constitution makes it very difficult to get there. You can either go through and get two-thirds of Congress to vote to add additional amendments, and then it takes three-quarters to pass it, or you can do it through a convention of states. So mathematically, it's very difficult. One of the things I'd like to do is see if Congress could, if it's constitutional, and I've got people checking and they're arguing about it now, but can Congress pass legislation to put term limits and make it retroactive, or not retroactive, but actually grandfathers the ones that are in there? Now, it'd take 20 to 30 years to weed out the ones that have been their lifetime. Mm-hmm. But we got to start somewhere. If elected, I'd like to serve 10 to 12 years, 5 or 6 terms. We've got some candidates say that 6 is maximum. The problem is with the way the system's set up right now, and it's so seniority-based, if you only serve 6 years and then we've got another freshman congressman in 6 years, you're doing your district a disservice.
Visiting with Glen Robertson, we've got a few minutes left here on the show. Obamacare has obviously been brought up a lot. What would you do with Obamacare? I think all the candidates are in agreement we need to get rid of Obamacare. Some say we need to replace it with a program that would give everyone $2,000 a year. What are your thoughts overall on repealing and replacing what we have with health care right now?
Well, I think you just hit the key when you said repeal and replace. Everybody else is talking about just repealing. We just had a very symbolic vote of Congress to repeal it. Now, it was political pandering at its worst because they know that the president's going to veto, and they also know they don't have the votes to override a veto. So before you can vote to repeal Obamacare, you need a replacement on the table. I'm getting very frustrated with federal government, and especially elected officials that pander to us and say, I'm going to repeal Obamacare, but they don't put a solution on the table. We've got to bring in, we've got the answers. We've got the experts in the field. We've got the medical directors. We've got the nurses. We've got the doctors. We've got the people in the insurance business. It needs to be driven from the ground up. We need a free market-based system that makes it very competitive. Competition's good. It'll increase the quality of health care and it'll drive down the cost. But we need a well-laid-out strategic plan to get there.
Early voting starts on Tuesday in about the next 45 seconds or so. Give that final pitch to voters out there.
You know, this is a job interview. First job interview that I've been on this side of the desk since I was 18 years old. But I'm asking for the job. I want to go to D.C. and work for the people of this district. I don't want to go to D.C. to enrich myself, to get a retirement package. I want to go represent the hardworking men and women of West Texas and the big country.
Where can people find you online?
GlenForCongress.com.
All right. Glen Robertson, we'll visit with you again next week, I know, as early voting begins. So get out there and I guess hit the campaign trail even more today.
All right. Thanks, Chad.
Have a good one.